like to call this meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners back to order. And we'll start the morning with a Pledge of Allegiance again, followed by, led by another one of our veterans, Mr. Shrum. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And then we'll go on with the, we'll start with the called order roll call, and then we'll move back into where we were yesterday. Suzanne, if you could please call the roll of the commission. Present.
Present.
We could have the members from the county advisory boards stand up and clearly enunciate your name and county for the record, please.
Ken Wellington, Elk Grove County.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. Gil Yonner, Carson. Tom Casanelli, Humboldt County.
Lynn Bunch, Mineral. Paul Dixon, Clark. Walter Mandeville, Lyon.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go back to where we were yesterday, and then we'll go back down to 20 and move on. Let's see, which was report of the itemized costs and expenditures of all NDOW employees and staff 10 WAFWA meeting in Anchorage 2010. Deputy Director Cates, you'd given us, there was an email on that.
For the record, Patrick Cates, you should have received on the 16th an email that had this report. It was the same email that had the minutes as well as the predator report we discussed yesterday.
All right, could just briefly go over that for us?
Sure. This report lists all of the people who travel to the WAFWA conference in Anchorage, aside from the commissioners, Deputy Director Haskins, Director Mayer, Tom Wasley, and Nu Nguyen. The department, for all four of those people, spent about $8,400 for that trip. Of that, about $5,000 was covered in federal funds, $3,400 with state funds, licensed dollars. Our DAG, we only paid for the airfare and conference registration. The Attorney General's office paid the rest of her travel claim. And just to explain here, under Deputy Director Haskins, his costs were reimbursed by the Western Nevada Trout Initiative, at least a portion of his costs for a few days of his travel, and that's why that item's below there. That's not an item paid by NDOW, that was paid directly by Winty. Be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Mr. Lamp?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I had a question. Was the Attorney General, was that budgeted?
Was it budgeted?
Was it budgeted?
Well, it's within our budget.
Could we take our Attorney General then?
Could you take your Attorney General?
And you can answer me later. There's quite a disparity in lodging and per diem between these individuals. Why is there such a difference?
Well, the difference actually is Tom Wasley wasn't there for the entire duration. I believe that the lodging rates and all that were all the same. Deputy Director Haskins looks less because we only reimbursed him for a portion of the trip, and Wenty picked up the other portion. The rates were all the same. It was just a matter of how many days were covered.
And the per diem was reimbursed for Deputy Director Haskins too by somebody?
Yes.
Partially?
Partially by us and partially by Wenty. That's what the $977 is
That
at the
accounts
bottom.
for the difference?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, move on. Item D, incentive for early applications for the big game draw program. Maureen Hullinger.
Good morning, Maureen Hullinger, Nevada Department of Wildlife License Office. And I'm here to present the agenda item for providing an incentive to apply early for the main draw. This was brought up at our August commission meeting by Commissioner Capurro. And after that meeting, myself, Chief Bob Hoyen, Don Sefton, and our Deputy Attorney General, Brian Stockton, had a meeting. And the paper that you've got in front of you kind of synopsizes the things that we've talked about. It identifies some of the concerns we have. It identifies some of the things that would work. So I'm just going to go through this and present those items for you this morning. So like I said, at August, we were charged with coming back to you and bringing forward the incentive idea. It's not the first time it's been brought up, but the first time was back in the 90s when we were all paper. And at that time, the incentive was possibly a rifle, which systems consultants thought they could have a lottery raffle or a contest for to load balance the mail-in applications at that time. It was brought back in August, and Systems Consultants is interested still because we do have a significant number of our applications online coming in within those 4 days just before the deadline. If you look at the numbers, we had 150,000 applications total, almost 144,000 online. In the last 4 days, about 50,000 of them come in just before the deadline. So we'd like to balance that load across the whole application period, and this incentive idea he's hoping would maybe do that. One of the concerns with the rifle option before was, the age requirement, the background checks, and things like that. So at our discussion, we determined that maybe we can just not do the rifle idea, but maybe do a gift certificate. And like I said, Systems Consultants was willing to do the certificate as to load balance. So one of the things we determined in our discussion was this would pertain to just the online applications, because that's where the problem is. The volume is coming in those last 4 days just online only. Procedurally, we don't think, our discussions, we talked about procedurally if we need to do regulations or statute. We were comfortable that it's probably just a procedure thing, but Deputy Attorney General Stockton was going to confirm that for us. We haven't heard back yet, but he's still looking into it. But we were comfortable that it probably could be established as a contest just procedurally. Now, one of the things that we will, if we decide to go forward with this idea, we have some things that we will need to bring forward to the commission for decisions. How do you, one of them is the eligibility. And one option for an eligibility requirement is a cutoff date. In our discussions, we determined that that really was not our best option, because from what Sefton was saying is that all that does is create 2 bumps, 2 deadlines. And it doesn't really level the load because it creates 2 bumps. We'd rather see a cutoff as to maybe a number of applications, and that, we can determine if we bring this back to you. Cutoff notification would, one of the topics we discussed about that eligibility requirement was whether we would notify applicants of that cutoff period. We'd rather not, because that way that level loading would continue, you know, and we wouldn't push it, you know, cause a bump anyways if we let them know, well, by, you know, the 5th of April, you know, you're no longer eligible or something like that. We'd rather just not tell the public when that cutoff is. One of the things that came up in our roundtable discussion was, do we restrict eligibility in who participates? Because when you see these contests, like, you know, on your soda bottles or something, you look at the fine print and it says, okay, members and employees of Coca-Cola cannot participate or whatever like that. This was one of the topics that came up. Do we restrict who can participate? And Deputy Attorney General Stockton was going to look into that also. Do we restrict it to, and you know, restrict NDOW employees? Do we restrict state employees? Do we restrict their family members? Do, you know, that was a question that we had. So that is something that we'll need to determine. And how do you oversee something like that if you determine that's necessary? NDOW employees would be fairly straightforward because we have a list. You know, if the person that's selected is an NDOW employee, you just set it aside and select another person. But if it's state employees or other family members, you know, that would be a little more difficult. It may come down to programming if all we do is an attestation on the website or something. So that's something that we might want to, you know, discuss if we bring it back. Now, in the handout, there's 2 graphs, and this is information that Systems Consultants has provided us since we started the online site application process, web applications by day, and then the cumulative web applications. If, you know, if there's a determination that, say, NDOW employees would not be eligible, then we would request that we not receive these so that there's no possibility of someone saying, well, they had the information as to when the spike was going to occur, when the cutoff's going to occur. We would request that they just not submit these to us anymore. So, or if, I should say, if NDOW employees are eligible, we would ask that they not turn this information over to us. Okay. Now the lottery issue, because that was one of the questions on the original request way back when we were doing manual applications. In our discussions, we felt that since there was no additional charge to participate, it's when you turned your application in, we felt that there wasn't an issue with the lottery terminology in statute. But Deputy Attorney General Stockton was going to double check that for us. And then one item that there's the Silver State Tag application process that could come online this spring. And we felt that since those applications were coming in at the same time as all the other apps, that they would be included in that load balancing. You know, we didn't want to exclude them from that. And that was pretty much what we discussed. The implementation concerns in a recap is that, you know, it would be online only. We'd have to determine the cutoff. Gift certificate versus, you know, an actual item. We anticipate that it'll be procedural. The eligibility, we'd have to determine that to include Silver State Tag applications. And depending on the eligibility, if there's programming. So that's kind of where we are right now. We want to get direction from you on bringing it back in December. If there's, we would need to have a decision if there are eligibility issues before January 1, because then Systems Consultants would need to probably load an attestation on the website so we can get it up and tested and such. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. Mr. Stockton, do you have any comments on any of those legal issues?
No, just that I need to research them still, and so.
But in general, it looks like it's doable, probably not if it's a rifle so much, but is that the way
right, for the, we were talking about a gift card. That's, I don't think there'll be a problem there.
Okay. And just in general, I know I was looking at, is it a factor in the restricted participation that SCI is actually offering the prize rather than NDOW? That would seem to be a factor to me.
That's part of the question, you know, because, I mean, if this is just SCI's deal and it's not really, see that, anyway, that's the question.
Okay. Questions from the commission? We had Mr. Capurro, then Mr. Lent, and then we'll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me congratulate you on kind of a thorough review of this of this whole thing, I think it's important, that's why I ask it be brought up, that we do something to try to level out that. I think it has a lot of different implications. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to go through some of the issues that you have brought up. First of all, in my view, it should only apply to the online big game draw, because it has a secondary benefit in kind of pushing people into the online application process. I think it is the suggestion that you use a gift certificate of whatever the amount and whatever the whoever it's for, whether it's Shields or Cabela's or whatever, is a good idea. Subject to the DAG's opinion as to whether or not it should be offered by NDOW or SCI. SCI has offered it. If that's possible for them to do, I think we ought to take them up on it. I think also the idea of the selected number of arbitrary number of applications does do exactly what you said. I think it prevents people from developing a second bump to the thing. So I would suggest that we go with that arbitrary number. It was suggested 75,000. Was that a number that both you and SCI kind of
It was the
came
first
down on?
number that Don he just picked when we were in our discussions. It's about half when you look at the total number of applications. I think that it's about 3/4 of the way of the application process, and but that is a number that we could come back to you to say, okay, give us direction.
As far as restricted participation on the list here, it doesn't show as employees of SCI, but they should be excluded.
They're already excluded from the draw process already.
And I don't have any, I think the wildlife commissioners should be excluded from this because we're making the decision on it. And I think if anything, it would look bad if we're involved in it, and I would use the same argument for the employees of NDOW. I don't have any heartburn with any other state employees because I think it's a difficult process to try to figure it out because of the movements and the changes in that. County boards, advisory board eligibility, I would leave that to others to discuss, and I think the prohibition of consanguinity is going a little further than what we really need to. I also believe that the Silver State tag applicability should be in there. New program incentive for them to start out on the right foot in leveling out those applications. And I would wholeheartedly suggest that we deal with this by the December meeting, if at all possible, and all of the AG's concerns are met. And looking through the rest of the list, I think the steps I just outlined would probably be the least administratively burdensome to the department. And I'll leave it at that. Again, thanks for the work that you've done on this.
Next, we had Mr. Lent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank Maureen for such a good presentation and getting the right people together. I agree with this concept. I think that to the extent possible, it should be a systems consultant. They should, in fact, I think they should even program it themselves.
I think that's the plan.
Because, see, it's going to benefit them, and and I think they should offer whatever we're going to do. I think the gun deal was just a start, but I like the idea of a gift certificate. But one of the things, and they've corrected the problem now with their file server, but if you remember when we did those 1,000 DOE tags, how it overloaded it, and it just was a big mess, and that's what people do. If you look at the graphs, what people do, and a lot of people, the first 500 people get a discount, the first 500 people get in there, and I don't know if you have two curves, but it looks like it's a straight curve on web application per day, not a straight curve, but pretty much there's no peaks in it. But a lot of people remember it at the last minute, and they put in at the last minute, and so I don't know if you want to move the curve up or something, but you could either say if people that apply by April 15th or whatever it is, or the first 50,000 applications will go into a special draw or something like that, either put a date or a number on it, and I think that's going to take, there'll be an incentive, and that's going to take some of the load off their file servers and their workers.
What Don was hoping is that, you know, you look at that first graph that says web app like day is hopefully to flatten that out, because human nature is to procrastinate, and you can see it. It happened in the paper environment, and it happens even online.
So I think that, you know, and I'd like to see it come back by December or the next meeting, so we can implement it by January the 1st. We have to have it December, and I'd like to see it. I'd support that 100%.
All right, and just throw one little concept out there. The more I look at this, I mean, this is a system consultant's idea. I would basically go with most anything system consultants wants. I just hesitate for the commission to get too deeply involved in the number of this, number of that. I'd go with system consultants' recommendations. If it's their donation, we just kind of need to facilitate them being able to do this for the benefits that have been described. That can be my general theory on it, is basically enable them. And you know, why should we be messing with the details when we're just enabling them to do what they're trying to do for the reasons that have been stated? Mr. Cavan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You basically summed up my comments, and I think systems should pick the number. They've got a really good feel for what goes on with these sorts of things, and I assume that'll be a moving target. They can move that around from year to year to try and accomplish what they want. So I don't think we should be trying to pick a number for them. I have confidence that they'll manage that system correctly.
Yeah, the main thing on that is as long as we hear the report of what they did and we don't like about it, we can complain about it the next year. And I doubt we will. Anybody got anything else? We want to move right on?
Thank you.
Good, thank you.